With the latest on the corporate front, all the market trends, expert opinion, and sound business advice, it is your unique window into the business world, direct from the heart of China.
Hello and welcome to Biz Today. I'm Zhao Yang in Beijing. China's economy grew 5.2% in the first three quarters of this year, exceeding 100 trillion yuan, or about 14.3 trillion US dollars. National Bureau of Statistics spokesperson Fu Linghui says this performance shows resilience among global headwinds.
Globally, China's 5.2% economic growth stands out among major economies. The country continues to be a key engine for global economic expansion. China's economy has maintained steady growth and shown remarkable resilience. This year, different regions have been developing new quality productive forces based on their specific conditions, which helps optimize the economic structure. We're seeing exciting advances everywhere, from large-scale AI models to robot marathons, from aerospace to self-driving cars. The close integration of innovation and industry chains keeps bringing fresh vitality to the economic development.
The industrial output increased by 6.2% from January to September, with the value-added output of equipment and high-tech manufacturing industries rising by nearly 10%. And retail sales of consumer goods rose 4.5% during the period, reaching over 5 trillion US dollars. So what do all this number tell us about China's economy, and where is it heading? For more on this, joined us on the line now are Professor Qu Qiang from Minzu University of China, Li Lun, Assistant Professor of Economics, Peking University, and also Yan Liang, Professor of Economics, Willamette University. So Yan, let's start with the headline number, 5.2% growth so far this year. So how significant is this performance for China's economy right now? And did they pretty much line up with your expectations?
Well, yes, I think this number really shows that China's economy has been really resilient, despite complex, international environment. So we've seen that, the first quarter growth, second quarter, and then now the third quarter, this year so far is 5.2% growth. And of course, there are some concerns about the growth is being slowed down in the third quarter compared to the first two. But I think if you look at the pattern, right, in the last 10 years, pretty much the third quarter is when, the growth started to slow down. But also, this is also from a very high base because last year by, the third quarter, because of a policy boost, the Chinese economy actually accelerated last year at the same time. So given this, I think the 4.8% growth in the third quarter is actually really healthy. And when you look at the more sort of the behind this headline numbers, you see the industrial production grows by 6.2%, especially in terms of a high-tech production. And then you're seeing, market sales in terms of retail sales, that has also gone up by 4.5% in the first three quarters. And that just shows, the supply side and the demand side seem to be in sync quite well. And also the export growth has been really strong. The total value has gone up by 7.1% in the first three quarters. So all of these seem to suggest that the economy is really on the right track to achieve that around 5% target. Now, of course, the investment is relatively weak. There's also concern about, the relatively weak CPI number. But I think, these are quite anticipated, and the government has been taking measures, right, like the anti-involution approach, trying to address some of these macroeconomic issues. So overall, I think, this number really shows the strong and resilient growth in China, as well as industrial upgrading and relatively strong, consumer demand. And the household income is rising basically in tandem with the real GDP growth. They're pretty much growing exact the same rate when it comes to per capita disposable income at the real growth rate at 5.2 as well. So given all this, I would say, the economy seems to be doing quite well. And so I think the next step is really trying to continue to stabilize the economy and also to achieve some of the long-term goal of structural transformation of the economy.
Professor Qu Qiang, so September CPI number is fell 0.3% year on year, but excluding the food food and energy prices, China's core CPI actually rose to a 1%, and this is a several months high. So how should we interpret it? Does it signal that domestic demand is actually picking up?
Yes, I do think our domestic demand has been changing and optimizing. Well, it depends on how you see the whole demand structure. Well, if we're talking about the traditional demand like the house, well, everybody knows in the previous 10 years, the Chinese spend so many of their incomes on the housing, which is like a very important investment and a very, very big one. On that perspective, yes, Chinese demand on the housing market has been slowing down. But also on the other side, you are seeing the new trend of the consumption is also on the rise. For example, in the large bulk consumptions, if we take a look at the equipment, you are finding out that the Chinese industries are actually been upgrading really quickly everywhere in every front of the businesses in every line of industries and sectors. You will see that people are trying to upgrade their equipment, digitalization, green energy, EV, Chinese EV. Everybody is changing their EV, upgrading their EV like they're upgrading their mobile phones, and also you see the solar panels. So we've been going through several generations of the solar panels, and their efficiency is going up really quickly. So right now, the solar farm has become really important, the energy providers in China, energy resources. And also talking about, other kind of the spending and also the service industry. You're seeing that China's service industry are rising up really quickly. For example, like the tourism, culture spendings, and sports spendings, which are not a very outstanding part in China's, consumption mix, but right now has become more and more important. People are trying to, reinvent their lifestyles. People are pivoting more towards those kind of, experiencing consumption and also the personal enjoyment and also the personal nourishment, this kind of a spending. So I think right now China is on a very important phase, is on a very important stage that we're shifting from an industry and supply-oriented nation towards a consumption and service-oriented economy. And that is one signal that is Chinese economy is going is very, very closely, very, very near to cross the border, to cross the threshold from a middle income nation towards a mid and high income nation when its GDP per capita is going across 13,000 US dollar. So I think we have lots of expectations to be there. When China go into that stage. And by that moment, you're going to see Chinese economic structure and also the consumption structures and also the perspective of future growth will be in a very different shape.
And we will discuss consumption later in our show. So Li Lun, actually, what really stand out to you in China's economic performance in the first 3 quarters?
Yeah, so one thing I'd like to point out is that we're seeing that the industrial output has been increasing steadily. So over the same period, basically beginning from the beginning of this year, the industrial production has been rising for 6.2%. September is especially high at 6.5%. So if you look at, for example, high-tech manufacturing and equipment manufacturing, they are they grew almost 10% year on year. So it's well above the industrial average. So I definitely agree with Professor Chu Qiang's point that we're seeing a quality shift. We're seeing an upgrading, not only in consumption, but I think also in production as well. So we're seeing, for example, more tech intensive, more productive, more innovative, products are being made. So these basically, I think, really embodies the what we call new quality productive forces, right? So I think with these industrial robots, with these EVs being, produced and innovated every day, it not only provides jobs, but it not only provides, options for our domestic consumers, it also, help our exporters to become more competitive globally. So I think, so definitely I think it creates a whole ecosystem where, our innovation, our R&D reflects into these, technologies, and it basically benefits the consumers, also benefits our, export market as well.
And so, yeah, actually, speaking of the high-tech development, especially the high-end manufacturing, this sector not only drives growth, but also create a lot of jobs for young people. So would you say this is, now one of the key engines shaping China's growth model?
Well, I totally agree that these emerging high-tech sectors are becoming more and more important driving force for China's growth. And as Li Lun pointed out, the growth of these high-tech manufacturing is way above the average growth of the industrial production as a whole, especially when you look at the 3D, printing devices, industrial robots, and the NEVs. They grew by 40% and 30% and above. So I think this is definitely the sign that shows that more and more industry growth is coming from these high tech sectors. Now, when it comes to employment, I think the employment number is actually improving. In September, the unemployment rate has gone down by 0.1 percentage points than in August. So now the unemployment rate is 5.2%. I definitely think that the high-tech sector and the advanced manufacturing sector are going to create some high-tech, high-paid jobs. But that said, we're also seeing a lot of automation and digitalization of the industries, which means a lot of times they become labor saving. So I think China need to create jobs not only in the tech industries, but more importantly, I think now is to create jobs in the service industries. So service industry has always been a major source of jobs in advanced economies. So we will still have technologies being integrated into the service sector. For example, we're likely to see AI applications more in healthcare, in education, tourism, and so on and so forth. But still, I think service sector is going to continue to generate a lot of jobs despite technological innovations and productivity growth. So I think on the one hand, we do need to make sure that we continue to upgrade industries and create jobs in these high-paid sectors. But on the other hand, I think continue to develop the service sector is going to also very helpful to support job creations.
And Professor Qu Qiang, so this year, the year 2025 Global Innovation Index has ranked China among the world's top 10 for the first time. So how do you see China's technological innovation capacity right now? And how can China turn these technological breakthroughs into the broader industrial upgrading, do you think?
Well, I think Chinese technology innovation actually has been really achieving a phenomenal and a substantial frog leap, especially in AI, in 5G, in green energy, quantum computing, and fusion technology. In all this very important cutting-edge technology fronts, I think China has been gaining its international competitiveness. And also, more than that, I think China is not only inventing the technology or following up with the latest a cutting edge level of the whole world. It's been turning those technology into, the real capacity of industry very, very quickly. So this kind of the TT capacity, technology transfer, is very, very important. I think this is the gold actually among the current backdrop of international economies. So I think China right now has been hitting a pivotal point of the economic structure transfer, which has been enabled by our technology transfer capacity. Another 5 years ago, 2020, if you're going to tell me China is going to be one of the most important car makers in the whole world, I wouldn't even buy it. If you're going to tell me that China is going to be the largest electricity producers in the whole world, I wouldn't buy it. But right now, there is the truth here that China has been marching on the very front line in the EV industry, in the digitalization industry, in the green energy, in the AI even. So I think China has been achieving a lot, especially, leading the global South nations to achieve their own version of modernization and digitalization. But also we need to see this is not the end. This is just a beginning, because we still have a lot of things to catch up with. For example, from the 0 to 1 in this kind of the sphere, China still need to catch up to, invent something radically upon our own feet, even to describe and invent something never exist in everybody's imagination and the whole human being. Nobody ever imagined this is something we need to do like our ancestors.
And so, the different provinces and regions in China have been developing the new quality productive forces based on their own specific conditions. So will this help optimize the economic structure, or could you give me some, specific examples of that?
Right. So I think this is also important as China look towards unified, national markets and have different locations, different cities or regions focus on their own sort of a competitive advantage, right? So the idea is not to duplicate every success, every significant industries, but really to sort of divide the market and also specialize in certain industries or sub-industries. And so I think, the example would be in, let's say, the south, right, in Guangdong and the Vicinity areas, they have been really developing very well in terms of their advanced manufacturing, low altitude economy. So I think those would be really the sectors that could continue to leverage on their strengths. And places like Shanghai or Hangzhou, they have made a lot of progress in AI and in some advanced robotics as well as medicine, right, biotechnologies. So I think there are ways for different regions to really specialize in some of the key sectors and develop their own strengths. And I think that would be a way to economize on, resources, but also to really develop the economies of scale. So I think when we have a lot of abundant resources, China's pattern has been, let's try to join force, let's really try to develop the same kinds of industries, but with different competitions around. And so we'll be able to innovate and develop the technologies or the industries further. But as I think, as China continue to innovate, to advance technologies and to develop its manufacturing capabilities, I think, it makes sense for cities, regions, and provinces and, different areas to really focus on some of their most, sort of the most efficient, right, areas. And so I think that would be a great way to allocate resources efficiently and to increase the production scale.
And so, Li Lun, when we talk about the new quality productive forces, there are particular sectors like what we mentioned, the AI, robotics, unmanned driving, etc., etc. So could they be the main driver of China's next growth cycle?
Absolutely. I do think they're definitely the future. And right now, I think we're in the critical area, time of embodied AI where, technology breakthroughs and innovations are made every day, but they're not, quite seen by the general public yet because, in terms of application, we're still exploring, the business models for these technologies. But I think, a lot of the big companies like Xiaomi and Alibaba are also like kind of investing or beginning to participate in this game. For example, Xiaomi has always have its humanoid robots, its quadruped robot, Cyber 1 or CyberDog 2, even though it doesn't get as much attention as Unitree. It's a very strong competitor because it can benefit from its AI models and all of its data. And also Alibaba has its own robotics and embodied AI team under its Q1 unit. So I think there are lots of, I think all of the major competitors or the major firms, tech firms in the industry are basically investing heavily in this area. So I think I also talked to some professors in our university about this, and their prediction is that in 2 or 3 years, we're going to see some very transformative and very different applications of these embodied AI, maybe even sooner than that. And in terms of, for example, innovative drugs or unmanned driving, I think these are all part of the different aspects of our innovation that we're kind of bringing combining the power of AI and computing powers into something that's tangible, that's going to affect our daily life, whether it's in terms of driving, in terms of our health, in terms of elderly care, child care, and so on. So I definitely do. So to your question, I definitely do think it will be the main driver of our next growth cycle.
And Li-Lun, also, when we take a look at China's economy, we also take a look at the demand side. The retail sales rose 4.5% in the first 3 quarters of this year, and consumption contributed to more than half of the GDP growth. So what does this tell us about the overall of China's economy?
Yeah, so we're seeing that the retail sales are not are basically growing only by 4.5% year on year, but it's not as fast as the GDP growth. But I think we also need to take into account that the retail prices are remaining flat, and for even for PPI it has been decreasing by almost 2.3% year on year. So that's going to take off a few percentage points off of this retail sale number. And among the retail sales, I think consumption is contributing to more than half of GDP growth in this period. So we're also seeing, for example, over the year that we're seeing the consumer trade-in program. We're seeing the ultra long special bond program, which is basically financing these consumer goods trade-ins. So overall, I previously think that some of these consumption subsidies are one time only, but I do think that with these policy vehicles, because with the ultra long special bond, they both create an investment vehicle for investors, and they also is able to finance further consumer subsidies into the cycle. So I think it just provides another cushion in terms of global headwinds. So I do think this is going to be a more sustainable policy tool than I previously expected.
And so official data show that nearly half of the consumption spending now goes to services. So what does this tell us about the evolving lifestyles and economic structure? And how do the initiatives like improving the elderly care, child care, and cultural services fit into the broader strategy of boosting consumption?
Well, I think you really, hit the nail on the head. I think in terms of the consumption potential in China, I think what we likely to see that grow the fastest is the service consumption. So service consumption, as you mentioned, is now about half of the total, household consumption. But again, when you look at advanced economies, for example, that ratio is much higher to, 70% or even more in the United States, for instance. So I think there's definitely a great potential for service consumption to grow. And I think, the Chinese government, as you mentioned, has been really keen on promoting the service consumption growth. I think that it's very reasonable for two factors. One is, as income grows, people will pivot towards more consumption. And so as you mentioned, there could be the entertainment, could be education, healthcare, cultural and other sports events, and so on and so forth. And I think, just suggested by the most recent data in the Golden Week of October, there have been 888 million trips that are made, domestically. And so you can see that people like to travel, right? People wanted to get that experiences. And also a new trend in consumption has been this, any consumption that would provide the so-called emotional values. So that has a lot to do with, this idea that now people already have enough food, clothing, all the basic needs. They are looking towards, higher level of consumption that will satisfy not just the basic needs, but the emotional needs. So that's why I think, service industries could continue to grow and provide more and more consumption opportunities. And on the other hand, as I just mentioned earlier, that even though now consumption is accounting for 50% of total consumption, there's still a very large room to grow, especially I think when it comes to elderly care, child care, education, and healthcare. I think these service consumption not only directly contribute, right, to consumption, but they also really help to provide the sort of the confidence, right, the the assurance for people, right? If you can get good healthcare plans, if you can have good, elderly care and so on and so forth, this would encourage people to spend more money on discretionary items, so they don't have to always save, so-called for the rainy days. So I can see how the promotion, right, of these elderly care, healthcare and education and so on and so forth would sort of, one stone hits the two birds, right? Directly increase consumption on the one hand, and stimulate more consumption by reducing the kinds of precautionary saving on the other hand.
And Professor Qu Qiang, so several major overseas banks like Goldman Sachs, now they raises a full-year GDP forecast for China for this and the next year. So do you agree with them? And what do you think are the main factors for it?
Oh, I do agree with them. Actually, I've been talking to Goldman Sachs and Morgan Stanley guys. They've been pretty much sure about Chinese growth in the next few years. Why is that? It's because they have been seeing this Sputnik moment in Chinese technology development. You can count from different angles with different standards, but China right now has made a lot of the breakthroughs within such a large country.
Well, we're speaking with Yan Liang, Professor of Economics, Willamette University, Li Lun, Assistant Professor of Economics, Peking University, and also Professor Qu Qiang from Minzu University of China. And that's all the time for this edition of Biz Today. Before we let you go, Biz Today is getting a new name. Starting next week, we will be known as Biz Talk. Same team, same analysis, just a fresh name that better reflects our conversation on both China and the world business and economy. I'm Zhao Yang in Beijing. Thank you so much for listening.
United Nations General Assembly has
major world affairs and in-depth news analysis.
All eyes are on the new blueprint as we
prevailing business trends and fresh growth opportunities.
Gold prices have reached record highs.
The thrill of sports.
Fans have switched to the FIBA European Championship.
The power of art and literature.
1,000 li of rivers and mountains.
And the connection forged through cultural exchanges.
I haven't seen the flying cars or the automated cars.
When young couples, they celebrate it by wishing for lasting love.
Stay with CGTN Radio for our brand new programming on October 28th.
Hello, welcome to Roundtable.
To World Today.
Welcome to Climate Watch.
When we bring you more timely information.
You're listening to the Beijing Hour.
This is China Africa Talk.
More diverse perspectives.
This episode of Footprints.
And more of the stories shaping our world.
This is CGTN Radio.